Hi everyone, it's Hayes, and today we are going to be talking about, it's probably going to be a really short video, but we're just going to talk about whether or not Chat Noir is going to die. I've been getting so many comments over the past 2 weeks asking me whether or not Chat Noir will die, asking when it will be, what Ladybug is going to do, how the show will go from there. And, well, I do kind of understand why this started. So Thomas Astruc did tweet out that Chat Noir was going to perish and Ladybug would have to get his Miraculous back and then combine his Miraculous with hers to make a wish to bring him back to life. But then he said it was a joke. So I'm definitely a bit confused as to why people actually believe he's going to die, since the creator of the show, the writer of the show, said he was joking. However, I have also seen loads and loads of other Miraculous channels making videos predicting that Chat Noir is going to die. And I am here to tell you the short version of the answer to this. Will Chat Noir die? The answer is no. And the short version of the explanation as to why is because this is a show made for children. And they don't usually kill off one of the main characters in a kids show. So I am 99.99% sure that Chat Noir will not die. He will be fine. So like I said, Miraculous is a kids show, but a lot of people seem to forget this when they critique the show. Like, it's fine to critique the show. I've critiqued the show. I have several videos critiquing the show. Like, I've done videos just on different episodes, like I did one on Truth, on Furious Fu, on the New York special, on the Shanghai special. And whilst I still loved all of those episodes, I talked about what I didn't like in them, things I was confused about. So it's fine to critique the show. However, when people are critiquing the show, they are holding it to the same standard as an adult show and they are expecting the same things from it. And that is not the case. And one of the biggest things they are expecting is some more adult themes, which isn't going to happen. You gotta remember, this show is written for 6-year-olds. And secondly, they are expecting Marinette not to make any mistakes. And in a show written for 6-year-olds, that's not gonna happen. She is meant to make lots of mistakes so children can learn from her. So if you don't know, if you write anything, whether it's a TV show, a film, or a book, for an audience aimed anywhere between the ages of 0, so from when a child is born, up until the age of 18, which is still classed as a child in most countries, there are certain rules that you have to follow when you write for those audiences. And I know because, hi, if you didn't know, I'm a published author and the audience I write for are young adults, and even though it's got adult in the title, it doesn't mean actual adults. Of course adults can read those books, there's nothing stopping them from reading them, but the young adult section is usually aimed at 15 to 18, so still children. So generally the older the child gets that you're writing for, less rules apply. So generally for the young adult audience, there's only really one rule I have to abide by when I write for them, is that I am only allowed one swear word or one curse word in each book. So I have to work out, like, where is going to be the best place for me to put this swear word, where it's going to have the most impact. And it's actually quite a lot of fun deciding where that's going to be, but that's really the only rule I have to abide by. However, the younger the child is that you're writing for, there are more and more rules you have to abide by. And the biggest rule you have to abide by when you're writing for young children, as in between the ages of 0 to 10 at least, the biggest rule you have to abide by is that it has to be educational. It can still have plot, it can still have great characters, but whatever you are writing, you have to be able to be teaching a child something through it. So there are some really, really obvious examples of this. So for example, Dora the Explorer, she teaches you Spanish. Dead obvious example. In England, I don't know if it's on anymore, but when I was growing up we had a show called Numberjacks, which taught you about numbers and how to count. There are other shows that will teach you colours, maybe in some countries, other shows that will teach you different languages, things like that. There are also some shows that will teach you about, like, possible careers. So for example, in England we have Balamory, which teaches you about being a teacher. We have Fireman Sam, about being a fireman. Postman Pat, about being a postal worker. Operation Ouch, about being a doctor, a nurse, a surgeon, something to do with medicine, things like that. So it has to be educational. So if you're wondering what the educational purpose behind Miraculous Ladybug is that it teaches you about friendship, it teaches you about being brave and doing the right thing, how to be a good person, and it also teaches you that it's okay to make mistakes like Marinette, as long as you redeem them and try to do better. And Marinette does make a lot of mistakes. Pretty much in every single episode she makes a pretty hefty mistake. but she pretty much always rectifies it. So because Miraculous is aimed at a bit older than like 5-year-olds, the educational purpose of the show kind of can become a bit more subtle and less obvious because the child is growing up and they'll see how obvious it is and then they won't watch it. So Thomas Astruc may be like all about the plot behind Miraculous, but he does have to make it educational in some way. And the educational value behind Miraculous, not that I think you should show it in a classroom, but the educational value is like about being a good person and it being okay to make mistakes as long as you try to do better and you try to rectify those errors. So there are some other rules. There are certain topics that can't be discussed in shows aimed at 4-year-olds. You just can't discuss things like murder, for example. That wouldn't fly in a show for 4-year-olds, obviously, so you can't discuss things like that. And generally death is something that is usually avoided. However, there are some exceptions, and the most famous exception of this rule is probably Mufasa's death in The Lion King. However, first of all, they're not human, they are animals, so it's not a human dying. Second of all, it's not just a kids film, but I would argue it's a family film. So there are probably very few kids the first time they watch it. Probably very few children are going to be watching that alone. There's probably going to be a parent or an adult with them who can console them if they do get upset at that scene. However, a true kids show, for example Shaun the Sheep, Peppa Pig, when my 3-year-old niece comes over and she watches them, I know I can stay in the same room but do my own work, and I can leave her to watch that on her own for half an hour and she'll be okay and nothing too distressing is going to happen because I know it's a safe show for kids and Shaun the Sheep isn't about to hijack the tractor and murder the farmer with it. Like, I know that's not going to happen because there are certain rules that Shaun the Sheep has to abide by. So like I said in The Lion King, it's animals dying, not humans. There's probably going to be an adult there with them, so you are allowed some degree of violence in kids stuff as long as it's not realistic, which is why Miraculous gets away with actually having quite a lot of violence in it because it's classed as fantasy violence. It's superheroes doing the violence. If Marina and Adrian in their civilian forms were beating people up, that wouldn't be okay, but because they're in their superhero outfits and the people they are fighting are also in fantasy outfits, it's okay. If you look on Netflix, actually there is a warning on Miraculous Ladybug for fantasy violence, and it's okay to have fantasy violence for children because it's unrealistic. However, I've heard in this next episode live, which is going to be on Saturday, I'm very excited, where I'm assuming Adrian and Kagami are going to break up or at the very least have a pretty big arguments. I have heard, I don't know if it's true, a lot of people have commented this, I have heard that Kagami is going to slap Adrian, and I will be extremely surprised if she does slap Adrian because they're probably going to be in their civilian outfits and a slap is something quite normal that a child could do to another child. So while I am not going to be really affected by that slap, like I'm 24 years old, I know it's not okay to go around slapping people. A 6-year-old child who's watching that episode may not realise that because they're obviously not fully developed yet mentally and things like that, so they may think it's okay. So I will be very surprised if that slap actually happens. So I'm not 100% sure if that's true just because it's not going to be fantasy violence, that will be full-on violence, and whilst a slap in general in comparison to punching someone is quite tame, I will be very surprised if she goes ahead and actually does slap him because that would be breaking quite a lot of rules. It's kind of okay for Hawkmoth to throw Chat Noir off the Arc de Triomphe as he did in one episode, but they're in their superhero outfits and it's not realistic. If you want to know more about like writing stuff for children, there's like an interesting parody series, though it can be a bit kind of like verging into the horror genre, so if you are like an older child who watches my videos, maybe don't go and watch it, but I will link it down below. It's called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, and it's just like a load of series of short films essentially that kind of parody the educational value. So the first episode I believe is about being creative, there's one about healthy eating, there's one about time, there's one about the internet, there's one about being in love. There's loads of different topics they touch on, but they do get kind of creepy, so bear that in mind if you are going to watch them, but they are really good, but maybe don't watch them if you're a child and are easily scared. So back to Chat Noir and Ladybug. Are they gonna die? No, because they don't usually, and when I say don't usually, I mean pretty much never, kill the main characters in kids' TV shows. They just don't. I think the only person who's gonna die in Miraculous would be Emily Agreste, and the reason why it's kind of okay for her to die, obviously it wouldn't be very nice, but the reason why it's okay for her to die is she hasn't really had a role in this series. We've seen pictures of her around all the time in Adrian's bedroom and the rest of the mansion, and we've seen her a few times in her coffin slash life support enclosure chamber thing. I don't really know what we're gonna call it. I don't actually know what it's called, but you know what I mean, down in the basement with all the butterflies, that thing. The only time we've actually seen her in action, I believe, is in, I hate saying the name of this episode, Gorizilla, the one where Adrian's bodyguard gets akumatized and Adrian like escapes the mansion to go and watch his mum in the film Solitude, I believe it was called. So the audience doesn't really have an emotional attachment to her. So obviously, because this is a kids show, Ladybug and Chat Noir will eventually win in the show. They will defeat Hawkmoth, and the way I think it's going to go is that end of season 5, not only will they find out each other's identities, but I think they may also defeat Hawkmoth, and Gabriel will have to give up on Emily and he will like turn off her life support machine and she will go quite peacefully. It's not going to be like a violent death. If you do have a death in a like kids media thing, it's generally very not violent. So for example, in Tangled, Mother Gothel, who like kidnapped Rapunzel at the start of the film, dies right at the end. So she's in the tower with Eugene and Rapunzel. She trips over Rapunzel's hair, falls out of the window, and she tumbles down to the ground, and if this was an adult's film, she would fall with a thud and her body would splatter everywhere. There'd be blood and guts just hanging from trees. It would be disgusting. However, because it was for kids, she just kind of tumbles to the ground, and by the time she gets there, the only thing left of her is her cloak because the rest of her has faded to ash. So it's not a violent death. So it's going to be quite peaceful when Emily does die, and it will be sad, don't get me wrong, it is going to be sad, but it's not going to be violent and it will be appropriate for children. And then I think at that point Lila would somehow steal the butterfly Miraculous and become the new Hawkmoth, because Lila apparently needs no reason to be the way that she is. She's just a horrible person. Just in general. But in answer to all the questions I have got about whether Chat Noir will die, I'm pretty sure the answer is no. He's going to be fine. This is made for children. They don't kill main characters off in things made for children. He'll be fine, don't worry, he's gonna be okay. Wouldn't it be absolutely hilarious if I'm actually wrong? We come back like 3 years from now, we're on series 6 and Chat Noir's died. I'm pretty certain he's not gonna die. I think they'll all pretty much be fine. The only character with a chance of dying is Emily. Everyone else will be Gucci. They will stay alive until the end of the show. I wouldn't worry about it. So please let me know what you think. I hope you no longer think he's going to die. He will be fine. And I will see you in the next one. Bye!